Three strangers, three highway stops, hundreds of miles apart. None of them knew each other, and none of them believed in anything they couldn't explain, until the night each one realized they were never actually alone out there. These are their stories, and by the end, you'll never look at an empty parking lot the same way again. Story 1. The Way Station. I used to drive long-haul freight before I switched careers, and if you've never done overnight trucking, you don't know what real tired feels like. Not, I need coffee tired. The kind where your body starts making decisions your brain didn't approve. This happened during my second year on the road. I was running a load from Ohio down to Georgia, and my dispatcher had me routed through a stretch of highway I'd never taken before, mostly because it cut through a section with almost no truck stops. Just two-lane state road for about 90 miles, dark as a closet, deer everywhere. I remember calling my girlfriend at the time to complain about the routing, half joking that whoever built this lane hated truckers specifically. Around 1:40 in the morning, my hours of service clock was screaming at me to pull over. Federal regulations aside, I could barely keep the lines on the road straight anymore. I'd been fighting sleep for the last 20 minutes, catching myself drift toward the shoulder twice. The second time, my tires caught the rumble strip and the noise scared me awake so hard my hands were shaking on the wheel for a full minute afterward. Then I saw the sign. Way station 3 miles. Open. That surprised me. Most way stations close overnight on routes like this, but if it was open, that meant people, lights, maybe even another driver to talk to and keep me awake. I took the exit. The station was smaller than any I'd used before. Just a single-scale lane, a squat cinder-block office, and a gravel overflow lot around back where drivers parked to log their hours. No booth attendant waved me through, which struck me as odd for a station that was supposedly staffed. The lights inside the office were on, but the blinds were drawn halfway, and I couldn't see anyone moving around inside. I pulled into the gravel lot to park for the night. There was one other truck already there, a white reefer unit with its running lights on but engine off. No driver in the cab that I could see. I sat there for a minute just studying that truck, trying to figure out if I recognized the carrier logo on the door. I didn't. It wasn't one I'd ever hauled for or crossed paths with on any of my usual routes, and after 15 years in and around trucking circles, that alone felt strange. You start to recognize the regulars. I climbed into my sleeper, but something kept nagging at me. My CB radio had been silent the entire drive, which wasn't unusual this late, but the second I put the truck in park, it crackled to life. Just static at first. Then, faint, a voice. Anybody sitting at the scale? Copy. I picked up the mic and responded, gave my handle, asked if they needed something. Nothing but static back. I figured it was just Skip. Radio waves bouncing weird at night, picking up a conversation from 50 miles away. It happens more than people think, especially in low valleys like the one this station sat in. I tried to sleep. Maybe 20 minutes passed before 3 sharp knocks hit the side of my truck right below the sleeper window. Not on the door, on the side, like someone had reached up and wrapped their knuckles against the steel. I sat up fast. Truck stops get weird company sometimes. Lot lizards, guys looking to steal fuel, the occasional drunk. So I wasn't in a panic yet. I slid the curtain open an inch and looked down. Nobody there. Just gravel, my own shadow from the sodium lights, and that white reefer truck sitting exactly where it had been. I told myself it was a raccoon, a branch, something stupid, and I laid back down. The CB crackled again. He's still in there. Just wait him out. That one I heard clean. No static garbling it. I grabbed the mic and demanded to know who was talking, told them this wasn't funny. Silence. I checked my mirrors through the window. Nothing moved in the lot. Here's the thing about being that exhausted. Your brain starts negotiating with itself. Part of me wanted to fire up the engine and just leave, forfeit the rest stop, drive until I found literally anywhere else. But another part of me, the part running on no sleep, kept saying, you're imagining this. You need the rest. Don't be that guy who quits his route over nothing. I compromised. I decided I'd walk to the office, tell the night attendant what was happening, and ask if security had cameras on the lot. Better to have a witness than sit alone with my imagination. Before I even got out of the cab, I noticed something I'd missed the first time. The reefer truck's running lights, which had been steady white this whole time, flickered once, then went completely dark. No engine sound, no door opening, just dark, all at once, like someone had flipped a breaker. I almost talked myself out of walking over there entirely, but the office lights were still on, steady and warm, and that felt safer than sitting in the dark next to a truck that had just gone dead for no reason. I made my way across the gravel. The office door was unlocked. Inside, the lights were on, a space heater humming in the corner, a half-finished cup of coffee still steaming slightly on the counter. Nobody was there. A logbook sat open on the desk, entries going back through the evening, driver names, plate numbers, times in and out. The last entry was time-stamped 11 minutes earlier. The name in the column was mine. Truck number, plate, everything correct. I hadn't written it. I flipped back a few pages, hands not exactly steady anymore, and found more entries with my information spaced out across different dates I recognized. I'd never once stopped at this way station before that night, and yet according to this logbook, I had signed in here at least 4 other times over the past year, always sometime after 1 a.m., always alone. I stood there staring at my own information in handwriting I didn't recognize, and that's when I heard the office door creak shut behind me. Not slammed, just eased closed, slow, like someone didn't want to startle me. I turned around and nobody was there, but the deadbolt, the old-fashioned kind, thumb-turn style, was now locked. I'm not a small guy, and I don't scare easy after years on lonely roads, but I felt something come over me that I can only describe as animal instinct. I went for the window instead of the door, a sliding pane above the desk, and forced it open enough to climb through. As I was halfway out the window, I heard footsteps cross the office floor behind me, unhurried, almost casual, like whoever it was knew exactly how much of a head start to give me. I dropped onto the gravel outside and ran for my truck without looking back. When I got in, I locked every door, started the engine, and didn't bother finishing my hours of service rest. I pulled straight back onto the highway doing 60 in a zone that probably wanted 40. About 2 miles down the road, my CB crackled one final time. He made it out fast this time. I called my dispatcher the next morning and asked if that way station was even a real state facility. She checked the routing database and told me there was no listed way station at that mile marker. Hadn't been one on record in over a decade. She actually laughed a little and said the coordinates I gave her matched an empty field on the satellite map, not a building of any kind. I never found out whose handwriting was in that logbook, or who else had made it out before me, or how many times I supposedly signed in there when I know for a fact I never did. I still drive that same freight lane sometimes. I take the 80-mile detour around that exit every single time, even though it costs me almost an extra hour, and my new dispatcher has stopped asking why. Story 2. The Man at Site 12. My wife Renee and I used to do a lot of car camping before we had kids. Cheap vacations, national forest sites, that kind of thing. This story is from a trip we took about 6 years ago through a mountain corridor in the Pacific Northwest, at a public campground that had individual numbered sites along a gravel loop. We arrived late, after dark, because we'd underestimated the drive. The campground host booth was closed for the night, so we just found an open site, number 12, paid through the self-service envelope box, and set up by headlight and lantern. Renee joked that we'd basically pitched our tent blind, and neither of us thought much of it at the time. Site 12 was at the far end of the loop, backed up against dense tree line, with the nearest occupied site probably 200 yards away. Renee noticed right away that our site had a strange smell near the fire ring. Not campfire smoke, more like scorched electronics, that acrid ozone smell. We figured maybe a previous camper had burned something they shouldn't have, though there was no scorch mark or ash in the fire ring to explain it. "That's not wood smoke," Renee said, wrinkling her nose as she unrolled the sleeping bags. "Smells like a hairdryer left plugged in too long." Around midnight, after we'd gone to bed in the tent, our dog Scout, who never barks at anything, not even other dogs, started growling low in his throat, staring at the tent wall facing the tree line. We told him to settle, and eventually he did, but he wouldn't lie back down. He sat upright the rest of the night, ears forward, occasionally letting out a small whimper that didn't sound like him at all. I woke up around 2 a.m. needing to use the vault toilet, which was a shared cinderblock building about 100 yards up the loop road. I grabbed the flashlight and made the walk alone, leaving Renee and Scout in the tent. As I got close to the restroom building, I saw a man sitting on the ground with his back against the outer wall, knees pulled up, just watching the road. He wasn't dressed for camping. Button-down shirt, dress slacks, no jacket despite the cold mountain air. I gave him a nod, the kind you give strangers at 2 a.m. when you'd rather not talk, and went inside. The bathroom lights were on one of those timer switches, and about 30 seconds after I walked in, the light clicked off on its own, way earlier than it should have. I hit the switch again. Nothing. I used my flashlight instead and tried to hurry. While I was in there, I heard the door hinge creak, like someone had opened it and was standing in the frame. I called out, asked if someone needed a second. No answer, but I could hear breathing. Slow, deliberate, like someone doing it on purpose to be heard. I finished as fast as I could and pushed past whoever was standing there in the dark doorway. My flashlight beam caught a shoulder, an arm, but by the time I got the beam up to face height, there was nobody there. I told myself it was Renee, that she'd followed me, but when I got back to the tent, she was still zipped inside, half asleep, and Scout hadn't moved. "You look like you saw a ghost," Renee mumbled, half awake, when I climbed back in shaking. I told her what happened, downplaying it at first, but she sat straight up the moment I mentioned the breathing in the dark. "We should go check together," she said. "If someone's messing with campers, the host needs to know before someone actually gets hurt." I should have just let it go. Instead, I made the mistake of agreeing with her, and we walked back together, flashlights up, to make sure nobody was messing with campers. When we got to the restroom building, the man in the button-down shirt was gone from where he'd been sitting, but there were fresh drag marks in the dirt, like something heavy had been pulled from that spot toward the tree line. Not footprints, drag marks, maybe 18 inches wide, disappearing into the brush. Renee grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise it slightly and pointed her flashlight along the drag marks. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Then, from somewhere back in the trees, we both heard it. A single dragging scrape, like the sound continuing on its own, further away this time. Scout, who we'd brought on his leash, absolutely lost it at that point, barking, lunging toward the tree line, more aggressive than we'd ever seen him. It took both of us to get him back to the tent. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. Renee sat up with a flashlight in one hand and the tent zipper pull in the other, and I honestly don't think either of us blinked more than a few times before sunrise. At first light, we broke camp early, and on our way out I stopped by the host booth, which was now staffed. I asked the host, an older woman who'd clearly worked that campground for years, whether Site 12 had any issues. She got quiet, set down the coffee mug she'd been holding, and asked if we'd seen him, the man near the bathrooms. When I said yes, she told us Site 12 didn't get rented out anymore except by mistake, back when the online booking system misfired because he still comes around that one. She wouldn't explain further, just refunded our site fee in cash and told us to drive safe. As we walked back to the car, I glanced back and saw her already reaching for a roll of caution tape behind the booth counter, like she'd done this before. We never went back to that campground. I looked up the site number online months later, out of morbid curiosity, and found exactly one forum post from years earlier, someone else describing a man in old-fashioned clothes near Site 12's restroom, watching the road. The post had no replies. It just ended, mid-sentence, like whoever wrote it had stopped typing and never came back to finish it. Story 3. The Ride Share. This last one is embarrassing to admit, but I think the embarrassment is part of why it needs to be told, so people don't make the same mistake I did. Back in 2021, gas prices were climbing, and I was a broke grad student trying to get from my university town in Missouri back home to visit my parents for a long weekend. A friend told me about a carpool matching app. Not a big-name rideshare company, more like a community bulletin board app where people posted routes and split gas money. I'd never used it before, but I was desperate to save money, so I made a profile. Within a day, I matched with someone named Dana, who claimed to be driving almost the exact same route, leaving around the same time I wanted to leave. Her profile had good reviews, casual photos, seemed legitimate. We messaged back and forth, and she had this uncanny way of agreeing with everything I said. Same music taste, same favorite road trip snacks, even said she'd gone to a summer camp I'd gone to as a kid, in a state most people had never heard of. I remember thinking it felt almost scripted, like she was mirroring me a little too well. But loneliness and cheap gas money have a way of quieting your instincts. Over the next 2 days we texted constantly, and she kept steering the conversation towards small personal details. My class schedule, what time I usually left my apartment, whether I lived alone. At the time it just felt like getting to know you chat. Looking back, it felt more like reconnaissance. We agreed to meet at a gas station just off the interstate, a pilot travel center, at 5 a.m., early enough to make good time on the drive. When I got there, the lot was nearly empty except for a couple of parked semis. I texted Dana that I'd arrived. She responded that she was running a few minutes late, but to head on inside and grab coffee, she'd find me. I went in, got coffee, came back out, and there was still no car matching the description she'd given me. A maroon Honda Civic, Missouri plates. I texted again. She said she was actually parked around the side of the building, near the propane exchange cage, because the main lot was too crowded with trucks for her comfort. It wasn't crowded. There were maybe 3 trucks in a lot built for 40 cars. But again, I didn't want to seem difficult, so I walked around the side of the building like she asked. There was no maroon Civic there either. Just the propane cage, a dumpster, and a service door propped open with a cinder block, dark inside. My phone buzzed. Another message from Dana. "Come through the door. It's faster. I'm parked in the back employee lot." That's the moment something in my gut finally caught up to my brain. I'd never told her I was walking toward any door. I hadn't sent a single update on my location since my first text. There was no way for her to know I was standing exactly where I was standing, unless she could see me. I turned around slowly, scanning the lot, and near the corner of the building, half hidden by the shadow of the propane cage, I saw someone standing completely still, watching me. Not a woman matching Dana's photos, A tall figure in dark clothing, hood up despite the mild weather, phone lit up in their hand. I didn't run immediately. I actually just froze for a second, the way you do when your brain can't process what your eyes are showing you. Then my phone buzzed again. "Are you coming?" The figure by the cage hadn't moved, hadn't looked down at a phone, but the message came through at that exact second. I bolted back around the building to my car, threw myself inside, and locked the doors before I even had my keys in the ignition. As I pulled out of the lot, I saw the figure step out from behind the propane cage into the open, just standing there watching my car leave, making no attempt to hide anymore. In my rearview mirror, right before I hit the on-ramp, I swear the figure raised a hand, not to wave, more like they were counting something on their fingers. I drove straight to a police station instead of getting on the highway, and reported the whole thing. An officer took my statement, pulled up the carpool app on his own phone, and told me Dana's profile had already been deleted. Account, photos, message history, all of it, wiped within the 20 minutes since I'd left the gas station. They couldn't do much with a deleted profile and a story about a figure near a propane cage. I get it. I probably would have filed it the same way if I were them. I did eventually find out one useful thing. The gas station's exterior cameras had picked up the shape of someone by the service door that morning, but the footage was too dark and too far to make out a face. The officer told me, almost as an afterthought, that they'd had 2 other reports that year of solo travelers being lured to meet rideshare matches at that exact gas station, both times around dawn, both times the account vanishing right after. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me, and I searched the Carpool app's old cached pages using a web archive tool, just to see if I could find any trace of Dana's deleted profile. I found a cached thumbnail, barely loaded, of the profile photo. Except in the cached version, the face in the photo was slightly different from what I remembered. Close, but not quite the same woman I'd been messaging. I never figured out which version was real, or if either of them was. I don't carpool with strangers anymore, and if I ever do end up needing to meet someone from an app in person, it's broad daylight, a crowded lot, and I don't move an inch from where I told them I'd be standing.